this will easily go down in history as one of the things I regret the most, and that is making this public. I forgot my computer's not muted, hold on. The title of this video might be a little misleading in the fact that I can't fit the entirety of what I wanted the title to be in the title. So let me go into details. I think the name of this video is going to be like, I made a crappy fanfic in elementary school and you can read it or something. Here's the thing, I made a lot of crappy fanfics in elementary school, and then a lot into middle school, and then it was all part of the same universe, and then it just kept on going. So, and fanfic isn't exactly the best way to put it, because there's a lot of original stuff in there too. In fact, let me break this down from the beginning. When I was in when I was in kindergarten, I liked to make comics. Comics like this. This, you know, a lot of kids did this back in the day. I thought it was kind of weird, but I learned that, you know, a lot of people actually do it, you know, when they're in, like, kindergarten and stuff like that. And it was bad. It's what you'd expect from an elementary school homemade comic. And, this one's about Batman. In fact, this is the very first part of the story, I guess. Hashtag Scarecrow did nothing wrong. Batman straight up murdered a drunk man in the streets. Later on, it will be established that Jonathan Crane was the president of Gotham, which apparently has a president instead of a mayor. When I was in kindergarten, I had a friend, and we both liked comics. We both liked DC Comics and Marvel Comics, and we decided, let's try to make our own comics and see how well that will go. So he made his, I made mine, and then at the cafeteria, we would like read each other's comics. And later on, more students would come and like, oh, that's cool, let me see. And eventually, it came to this like weird release schedule where both me and him would make a comic, and then like everyone coming to lunch at a certain day of the week would know that, you know, there'd be a new comic to read, or more than just one new comic to read. It was interesting. But yeah, we eventually had this comic circle where me and my friend were sharing our comics. I eventually lost those comics. Mine was all set into one continuity. It was Batman comics. And, you know, each issue built off on the next and stuff like that. Each one introduced a villain, you know, sort of villain of the week type deal. But eventually in kindergarten, I lost those comics. I'm like, oh man, how am I going to know what happened in past continuity? Because even as a kindergartner, continuity was like my #1 favorite thing in the world for some reason. So I made up an entirely new, I started off with a new run of Batman comics, and that's when this one happened. It was my second comic continuity that we shared around in kindergarten. I remember people being disappointed that I lost the originals, but like, it's okay, we can reboot, we can fix some mistakes that I wanted to, as if it was that well thought out. But you know, I can just make another second continuity. And so in kindergarten, I made this Batman #1, and this serves as the foundation for what would be called the Cuckoo Universe. Now, if I've learned anything from browsing TV tropes, it's that, you know, in the sphere of stories, you can have, like, expansive stories, you can have an expanded universe, a shared universe, but apparently an expanded universe means that there's one core work, and like everything else is sort of tangent off of the main core work. I certainly don't have an expanded universe, because that would mean everything would have to deal with Batman in some way, shape, or form. At some point I had developed this comic universe so much that whenever I wrote fiction, I decided, well, let's just stick it in this universe anyway, and it fits, let's just stick it in that universe. Because I liked how Marvel and DC Comics had their shared universes. And on shared universes, it's not exactly a shared universe either, because according to TV tropes, a shared universe requires more than one writer. And technically there is more than one writer for the Cuckoo Universe. We'll talk about that name later. But like, one person co-wrote one issue, and another person wrote about 5 issues, and then beyond that, the other over 100 issues were me. So that's not really a proper shared universe. Apparently the TV tropes term for what my fanfiction universe is called the verse. Which is really clunky to say. Like, nobody knows what you're going to say. Like, oh yeah, I have a fictional the verse. That sounds weird. But the verse is when it's essentially a universe of multiple stories, you know, that could feel like a shared universe if all these different stories were written by a different author. Except all of them are written by one author, and that's the verse. What a terrible word. Lord Straxus just melted in the core, Blaster said as Straxus fell through an opening in the planet's surface. See ya, Autobot scum, Megatron said, jumping off the planet. He flew off Cybertron, the Autobot said. That's a natural story progression right there. But yeah, when I was making comics like this, I was like, oh, DC has their name, DC Comics. Marvel has a name, their brand, it's Marvel Comics. I should put a brand on my comics. And so I went with Cooku Comics, that's Cooku. I don't know why I chose it. I was a kindergartner. What, you're gonna expect a kindergartner to come up with some meaningful, like, oh, that's a good brand name, elementary school Primus. Like, no, of course not. But Cuckoo, it was originally called Cuckoo Comics when it was in the comic stage, elementary school, even up until like early high school, I was doing these comics. My elementary circle, faded away around kindergarten, first grade time. But then I still kept making these because I liked, the continuity. Like, I had already made like 21 issues by that point. It's like, may as well keep on going. And I shared it with my sister, and I shared it with my mother. So, pretty sad. I also kept going because for a long time in my childhood, I was grounded from like using the computer and television and internet and all that stuff. So I really didn't have anything else to do. So I spent my time, one, reading the encyclopedia. So that's how I know my history knowledge. And two, making these comics, because these are very time-consuming. And yet they're still crap. Just because it's time-consuming doesn't mean it's good. Suddenly, Dr. Destroyer blasted through the wall of his home. I told you to be careful of what you buy, he cried. You just want to help people with their purchases, You don't want to have people spending their money frivolously, or else this random villain's gonna bust through your home. But it was called Cooku Comics, and then eventually, about the time, there's a time period. There's this weird transitionary phase in high school where I go from making comics to making text stories, because I hate drawing. Also, my art, it's hard to tell when a comic came out from like my art in elementary school and high school are identical, so there was no advancement in that field. And I thought, hey, if I don't spend as much time working on the art, maybe I can develop the writing and the story better. So at that point, the Cuckoo Comics became the Cuckoo Universe, because I wasn't doing comics anymore. A lot of my stories in high school dealt with fixing continuity errors from these old comics. But we can talk a bit about the progression of the comics. They started off with Batman, and then from Batman we set up the Justice League, made other comics like Superman and Flash and stuff like that. It was a very DC type comic universe, poorly written. Hello, Sentinel said. You're alive, the hero said. Martian Manhunter materialized in the room. Pleased to meet you, I am John Jones, the Martian Manhunter. You're Superman's friend, Sentinel said. You, I know, live in a space station, Batman said. Yes, goodbye, Martian Manhunter said, disappearing. He disappeared, Batman said in surprise. That's how I introduced Martian Manhunter, by the way. Through that quick little exchange. I obviously didn't have a good understanding of the characters, because in Batman #1, Batman murders an innocent man. And as I was, maturing and going into high school, I realized, Jesus Christ, what did I write? So a lot of my high school stories are fixing that stuff. So yeah, the comics were very DC-based. I eventually made a Wolverine miniseries that was supposed to be a separate continuity that I eventually said, I just put it in there anyway. I made a Transformers comic series that I put into the continuity. And then we can talk a little bit about the original stories, because even though they're technically original, they're not fanfic. They certainly rip off and plagiarize a lot of other works that aren't mine. Because at this point, I like writing, I just don't write well. That's the thing. In fact, the point of this video is, can you tell that I haven't scripted this or outlined this in any way, shape, or form? The point of this video is to say that you can read my terrible writings from kindergarten up until now. There's a link in the description to a Google Drive. There's an introduction pamphlet type thing. There's a writer's notes that annotates each issue. Batman freaking throws a dude off a roof. Don't worry, he lives. In fact, I'll probably have weird lines or something from the writer's notes pop up every now and then in this video to show you just how weird this universe is out of context. To the people of the United States of America, I am the assistant of the President of the U.S. I am here to inform you of the current situation of U.S. forces in Mexico. Yesterday, our very stupid president went into the Union of Mexican States, on the verge of surrendering to the drug empire of cartel, might I add, and threatened Mexico that if they did not try to stop Mexicans from crossing the U.S.-Mexican border illegally, the U.S. would take over Mexico, which would just make the situation worse. But with someone with the IQ of the president, that is, the IQ of an eggplant, that made sense. So if you want to read this crap, be my guest. I'm aiming for releasing a set of old stories, like elementary, middle school, even high school era stories, and one 2018 era story, because I kept writing, you know. I want a set of old stories and a 2018 story coming out every day. And you can see the release schedule there. And I believe once we hit June, I'll be writing like new stories. So at that point, it's almost like an actual comic company, how you wait each week for a comic. Of course, they're not comics anymore; they're text stories. But yeah. If you want to see my writing, if you want to see a world where the DC Comics characters, the Marvel Comics characters, the Transformer characters, and wizards in space are all in the same universe, it's there for you, man. So wizards in space. We can talk a bit about the original stuff I put in there because, you know, people know what Batman is. I don't need to introduce some of that stuff. But the other stuff I wrote, I think we can start with space wizards. You heard that right. Space wizards. When I was in, I think this is a middle school time. When I was in middle school, I realized, you know, I'm writing all these characters that I didn't necessarily create. They're DC characters, you know, it's Batman, it's Superman. What if I tried to write my own original story with original characters? And I came up with space wizards, because I was really into Harry Potter at the time, and I was really into Star Wars at the time. There is this sort of, it is about a chosen one character with a scar in a magical school, but that's about as far as a similarity. And there's robes, but that's about, and there's wands, I guess. But what do you expect from a wizard? But that's about as far as the similarities go with Harry Potter. Because even though I was into Harry Potter, I didn't actually like Harry Potter that much. I read the books and I read Deathly Hallows when it came out, but I was just kind of reading it because everyone else was. Space Wizards also doesn't really rip off Star Wars as much as I thought. I re-looked through it a while ago, and it didn't rip off as much as I remembered it ripping off. In fact, I don't think anything really was ripped off from Star Wars. There is one thing that's ripped off in Space Wizards, and it's sort of like, it's the sort of ripping off that I'll do in future stories that I'll talk about, where I just take a concept or like a machine, a device from another story and just put it in my story with no explanation as to why it's there, and that's the exosuit from Transformers. The exosuits are in Space Wizards, and they eventually build up to like more advanced versions of this exosuit. There's this huge one that is basically almost, I can compare it to like the Hulkbuster armor, where it's huge and there's like miniguns everywhere. But the original exosuit is also in Space Wizards. Basically, the American government discovers that wizards are a thing in 1958. They create NASA as a conspiracy to send wizards off into space because the American public would be too concerned if they figured out wizards were with them. So you have these wizards living in what's called a blockade. It's not a blockade. A blockade is sort of a military tactic to prevent resources from going into a certain area. This blockade is just, it's like calling the International Space Station a blockade. It's just something floating. They're satellites, basically, orbiting sort of space cruisers. But I call them a blockade because middle school era Primus didn't know what a blockade was. You know, they have to fight the Dark Lord, Darkar, who I think I eventually retconned to be a Nazi. It makes sense in context. Trust me, it makes... In fact, if you knew the whole context, you'd be wondering why isn't he a Nazi? I don't know, it's hard to explain. You have to read it for yourself. I don't think it's released yet in the public form, because I have to annotate each story, so people who have no idea what's going on, because I write terribly, can check back and see what's going on. President Me. Now, President Me was an interesting thing, because look at that name, look at that title, President Me. You'd think it'd be like a sort of self-insert character, like what if I was president? And the concept started off like that, and then it didn't go that direction at all, but I kept the name. Basically, around that time, I was really into the video game Europa Universalis 3. And for that game, a lot of people were making after-action reports, or AARs, and basically it was a story set in their Europa Universalis 3 universe, to sort of tell what they're doing in the game. Sort of like a novelization of a walkthrough, only an immersive novelization. And I liked that. I was like, I'll do it myself. I'll make it a political satire, and it's it's about as intelligent as you'd expect a middle schooler's political satire to be. I'll make a political satire about a foolish president of the United States, and it'll be like sort of a critique on foolish policies the United States has. And since I'm the player of the Europa Universalis 3 game, and this is with the modern day mod, I'll have a characterized version of myself be president. So then I outlined that, I outlined the other characters I wanted to do, I outlined some of the plot threads I wanted to do, and then it came to the point where playing the game was annoying, and I stopped playing the game for a while, but I really liked the characters and the concept, so eventually I just wrote it as a normal story. President Me, and that's his name, Me, he's, again, in the original concept, it was a self-insert character because it was a let's play in written form, and then by the time I started doing the stories, nope, he's a completely different character. But I didn't bother to change the name. Conquest. Oh boy. Conquest. So there's a story behind Conquest. In fact, Conquest isn't fully written out. There's just a timeline for it. There's like the beginning, like the flashback scenes have been written out. A timeline for what happens between the flashbacks and the current day stories, and current day stories that pretty much are an epilogue to the main story of Conquest. And that's because Conquest was originally something that was just in my head and I didn't bother to write down. Because at that point, this was late middle school, I think? No, this was early middle school. But I was busy writing a lot of the comic type stuff then, and I didn't want to take away time from writing that. Basically, I had trouble I still have trouble sleeping. But like I'm not like other people who can just lay down and go to sleep. I have to lay down, and I just sit there contemplating existence and life and the meaning of life and society for like about 2 hours until I can finally fall asleep. Eventually I got tired of it, and I'm like, okay, what can I do? I'll just make up a world. I'll make a world in my head and just think of this story. I'm not going to write it down because who would even bother? It'll just keep me entertained as I'm trying to fall asleep. And I came up with a story of this guy who wants to take over the world, unify it, and then become like the worst dictator ever, so people would hate him. So they would unite to kick him out, and he would leave the planet, and then the world would be in peace. If that sounds a lot like Code Geass, that's because it is. Code Geass was my favorite anime at the time, and obviously I wanted to take the premise of Code Geass and like set it in a modern day instead of like a fantasy, Britannia type world, and try to make it more realistic. It went off the rails immediately. Conquest is about what you'd expect from a silent, lonely, emo middle schooler, as their original story. The main character is this dude called Alexander Pratensis, and there's a reason he has such a weird name, but that'll kind of be spoiler. It's because he's part of this Assassin's Brotherhood. Now, there's a lot that I ripped off for Conquest, and I'll get into that later. Assassin's Creed is not one of them, because I had not played Assassin's Creed. I don't think I even heard of Assassin's Creed by the time I was making the story for Conquest. However, in Conquest, there's a thing called the Brotherhood of Assassins, who are a secret organization that's been founded since the assassination of Julius Caesar, who have been important throughout history, assassinating people, and they have underarm, hidden blades. And it's a genetic thing, like if you're born to the assassin family, you stay in the assassins. Now, I know that sounds incredibly ripped off from Assassin's Creed, but I had not played Assassin's Creed when I made Conquest. So, Assassin's Creed was if you think about it, the concept of Assassin's Creed is pretty, the concept of Assassin's Creed isn't very complicated, I don't think my Assassin's Brotherhood wore hoods, but eventually, like in high school when I played Assassin's Creed, I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I wrote in Conquest. Might as well make the assassins wear hoods anyway. People are going to think it's ripped off anyway. May as well give them the hoods because the hoods are cool. But instead of being based out of like Masyaf or whatever, they're based out of Shandong and stuff like that. But where was I? Yeah, how Conquest is pretty much like what you'd expect from an emo, introverted middle schooler. The main character has... Oh yeah, I was talking about the last name. Pratensis is a Latin last name, and I was going to tie back to his oldest ancestor being one of the dudes who assassinated Julius Caesar, and was at the foundation of the assassins. But yeah, Pratensis, he wields katanas, because of course he does. He is super good at he's a Mary Sue, essentially. although I wouldn't say he isn't flawed. He is flawed, but I don't think the flaws are proportional to how cool he is. He's this world champion fighter who's never lost a fight. At least that's what I say in the story. He's never lost a fight. If you actually read it, he has lost several fights. But he's destroyed alien empires. He's conquered countries. We can talk a little bit about the plagiarism in Conquest, too. Star Destroyers are a thing in Conquest. They're called Star Destroyers. They look like Star Destroyers. I don't think it's even referenced that the Star Wars movies exist in the Cuckoo Universe. So the Star Destroyers are just there, called Star Destroyers, unabashedly, unashamedly. A lot of the flashbacks are plagiarized, like, almost word for word, with scenes from the anime Hayate the Combat Butler. And that's because I had all these characters made for Conquest. In fact, with Conquest, I made a lot of characters before even starting any story, because I wanted to focus on building up this world of characters. And then, around that time, I started watching Hayate the Combat Butler. And I was like, a lot of these characters are kind of similar. And hey, Hayate knows how to stick together these characters in a plot that makes sense. It made sense back then. Hayate the Combat Butler eventually got off the rails and was terrible. So I thought, why not just rip off the original, like, about the first season of the anime, and then, like, one of the flashback arcs in the manga. And let's just make that canon, replace character names with Conquest character names, and there we go. It's terrible. I was in middle school. And that's important too, because here's the thing. Besides the time in first grade and kindergarten where I shared the comics, and a little bit into elementary school where I shared the comics with my, like, family, I eventually came to the point where I was just writing these stories and didn't want to show anybody. And when you do that, you can't improve or get any feedback on your writing. So there's like 10 years worth of stuff where I'm just writing for myself. I'm writing because it's fun. I'm not writing to improve my own writing. And I'm writing for myself, and that's it. The reason I'm making this stuff public is because I want to get better at writing. And in order to do that, I'm too attached to this Cuckoo Universe. You know, so much of this stuff is crap because it's from either my elementary school years and middle school years, or when I was just writing for fun for myself. Plagiarizing left and right without any fear of, having to show it to anybody. But I do want to improve my writing. I don't want to give up this universe. I want to keep writing in it. So my goal is to keep writing in this universe, but have the writing be good. And in order to get better at writing, you have to have feedback. So that's why I'm making this stuff public. I'm getting the back issues out of the way. And I'll use comic terminology, even though at this point it's only text stories. Just because I like comic terminology. So that's why there's the Google Drive in the description. Every day I update the drive with, back issues. And, if you want to read this terrible fanfiction, the entirety of the original Batman series has been transcribed. Because I'm not going to scan all these comics. There's like over 100 of these things. It will take forever to scan each page and put it into a PDF. So I transcribed them, and it's kind of hard to follow a transcribed comic because comics are a visual medium. But the writer's notes are there to help you understand more about what's going on in the comic without having to, trying to preserve what was in the original comic in text form with the original transcription. There's a reading order. I believe I'm going to keep adding comics. Again, they're text stories. I think I'm going to keep adding these stories every day up until some point in June where everything will have been uploaded, and then I'll just be working on a weekly basis writing these stories. So, if you guys check it out, I guess I'd appreciate it, I guess. It's more of a point and laugh type deal, yeah? But it's this crazy world where Transformers, G.I. Joe, all the DC Comics universe, a good bit of the Marvel Comics universe, a dude that's clearly a freaking Mary Sue made by a middle schooler who conquered the world once, space wizards, and an incompetent president all come into one. So I think it's sort of unique in that regard. It's also an ongoing fiction story that I started in kindergarten, and I am still making new installments to this day, and I think that's kind of unique too. Because, typically people write a story and they're done with it. They don't keep writing in it, and then keep writing in it, and then keep writing in it forever. So, yeah. I really should have outlined this video, but whatever. Yeah, that's the Cuckoo Universe. Links are in the description. I hate everything. I hate my life. But, as much as I hate what I've done pretty much from this point backwards. I hope that what I do from this point onwards will be better thanks to feedback from you guys. There is a Discord. Make sure to join the Discord channel, the Discord server, because there's a channel devoted to the Cuckoo Universe. And, I won't be talking about this too much on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter. I put updates. I announce when there's updates to the Google Drive on Twitter. I also announce it in the Discord server. Thank you guys for watching. If you're reading in the stories, feel free to leave a comment. I am looking forward to your feedback at how terrible some of this stuff is and how I don't get a grasp on a lot of the characters in my elementary school years. And it's just crazy. Yeah. See you guys.